Welcome to the Virtual Door Knocking in 2020 podcast. Today with my guest, we will be discussing the power of the podcast and how it applies to our present situation with campaigning and running for public office. With all the restrictions that have been placed upon us because of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as the stay-at-home orders, social distancing, and various phases to open up the communities and economy, how the candidates once ran their campaigns in the past are just a distant memory. So with that being said, I want to introduce my guest, Kurt Grimmer, who, if you really are from around here, you probably know him as Mr. Gig Harbor. Mr. Gig Harbor has won the Penn Met Parks election 3 terms in a row now, and so he's got some great advice on really, with the new restrictions, how this could help. So Kurt, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you?
Yes, I've lived in the Gig Harbor area for over 30 years, and I've been involved in the community in many different ways, primarily recreation through helping supervise youth sports activities as well as coaching many sports and coaching upper-level soccer for over 10 years. And 12 years ago, or 6.5 years ago, I decided to run for the local park district board of commissioners. And I'd never run for an office before. And granted, it's not a partisan office, which gives you certain advantages because you can cross the aisle, so to speak. You know, you can reach out to the different political parties and see if there's an opportunity to come in and talk to them. And you don't really have to talk about political issues per se because everybody loves recreation. But so I did that, and it worked really well, reaching out to all the community groups, nonprofits, Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, what have you. And then seeing if I could have an opportunity to speak to their people, and that opened up all kinds of doors. And once a group of people hear you, they tell you about something else, or they know about another organization, they tell them about you, and they invite you to come speak. So it's a little easier in a size of community of ours, about 45,000, to do that type of thing versus a statewide race and that type of thing. That's a whole nother dimension. But in today's world, with COVID, that's really hard to do. And we have a lot of local races going on right now, primaries. And I know those candidates are really struggling trying to get to, because the traditional type of campaign venues just aren't readily available right now. A lot of Zoom meetings, but those tend to reach a real limited demographic type of group each time. So I've learned a lot doing that. And so I'm really excited about this podcast opportunity because I think based on how comfortable people are becoming with technology and using this type of format and venues, I think there's an opportunity for candidates to take advantage of it, but I think it's going to be around forever afterwards.
And I think you're right. So let's talk about what today's reality looks like. There's no more door knocking, no more shaking hands, no more kissing those babies like all the politicians used to do. And so my first question to you, Kurt, is what are the potential benefits for election campaigns to use podcasts as an opportunity to get that candidate's message out, the platform out in front of the voters, get connected to those voters, the endorsers, and the fundraisers, and at the end, the media?
Yeah, great question. And I think the simple answer to that, I think there's a real opportunity with podcasts to reach a wider and more diverse audience and demographic than you have in the old traditional types of methods. You know, if you got invited to come talk to the local Kiwanis club, you know that Kiwanis club every club, organization, nonprofit, what have you, has its own characteristics. You know, and it's based on who the majority of their members are. So sometimes that doesn't really connect you to the wider community, and so you have to hit all of them. But with a podcast, you have that opportunity to really expand much beyond that. And linking the podcast recording with social media portals or outlets can extend the reach to voters for days, if not weeks, and beyond throughout your entire campaign.
Yeah, that's great advice. So really, you're making yourself more efficient, and probably because you have, depending on what race you're on, you probably have very little capital funds to pay for marketing and advertising. It's a good way to pay for it once and then get it out to a lot more voters as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a really good point because traditionally in the old style campaigning, you bought advertising in the local paper, you put up, you maybe rented some big billboard signs, you had a lot of printed material that you handed out at the venues you went to. And newsprint has basically disappeared, right? I mean, the newspapers keep getting smaller and smaller and going out of business. So that avenue has really kind of disappeared. Being able to hand out brochures and stuff in this COVID situation is greatly disappeared. The yard sign opportunity is still there, and that's still, I think, an effective tool. Some people argue pros and cons about that, but I think there's a whole strategy behind how you do that. So it's a great question, and I think going forward, I think candidates are learning a lot new tools to use for their campaign versus the old traditional type.
In those old traditional print methods that you just talked about with the newspaper, the print ads, the mailers, and the lawn signs, you're really not connecting with your audience. All you're doing is putting your name out in front of your potential voters. But tell us how you think the podcast will help you connect with the people so they get a chance to hear you, see you, watch you, and just get a chance to get to know Kurt from a more livelier way as opposed to just a print ad way.
Great question. The print style and the signs, the yard signs, stuff like that is really a graphic kind of tool to use. But what really matters, when people see that, you really hope that they know who you are ahead of time, because then they'll really relate and identify to it. But it's a graphic, reminder of who you are. And as a candidate, you need to have a single image that identifies you and your mission. And what I mean by this is an image can include a combination of campaign slogans, photos, signage, effective use of design and color and graphics, but more importantly, photos and video. And the video aspect is, in today's environment, you're so right, is what allows people to see who you are because of the way you articulate your dialogue, your facial expressions, the way you look is all part of that process. And if you can match up your dialogue and your speech pattern and your voice inflections with the message you're trying to get out, and have that blend in with your personal appearance, it's very powerful.
Now, would you recommend if you went the way of video and podcasting, would you recommend, taking some time out and hiring maybe a PR coach to really help you communicate and deliver that message?
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Fortunately, I'm not having to run this year, but I'm sitting here in my den, right, and I've got a little bookcase behind. But in my own mind, that's not really what the image I want to have in the background while I'm doing a podcast about an election or an office I'm running for. And I wanted to go back to what I said earlier about the importance of the graphics that you have backing you up and the colors that you use, and how they tie in with what your message is and who you are. So that's a really, really important point. And it goes all the way down to coaching on proper voice inflections to emphasize certain things, facial expressions, and clothing. The world has gotten a lot more casual in clothing. It used to be if you ran for office, you had to wear a suit or coat and tie and dress up, right? Well, that's really gone by the wayside. And I'm glad it has because it makes people feel a lot more comfortable. But all of us, even veteran politicians could use that type of coaching.
Absolutely, great advice.
And that may be some of the most valuable coaching you can get when you run in an election, even if you've run before.
And really, we all get the chance to watch like the national campaigns because they televise those. And isn't it kind of funny how when you're watching the debates live on TV, you got 10 candidates up there, and as soon as they open up their mouth and they start to talk and their body movement and gestures like that, you can just tell right away they won't make it to the next debate.
It's funny how us political junkies, we all wish that we were majored in political science, or maybe you did, but it's entertainment value. But at the same time, you're so right. I can sit there and watch these debates, and subconsciously, I'll get that impression about they're never going to make it. But I'm not really a student of that, and I don't really understand why I feel that way. But it's something that we inherently have in our brains, I think.
It takes us a nanosecond to realize that person's not going to make it very far. Absolutely. So you started to touch on the point about having a nice campaign marketing strategy. Now, why don't you kind of tie that together with a podcast? How would that look?
Well, your initial first few sentences out of your mouth as to why you're running are really important and vital. And I've seen a lot of campaigns and a lot of politicians and people that have run before and been elected before don't grasp that first part of it to try to draw the audience in, and it's really hard to do. But what the voters wanting to see is they want to see your passion. I believe that they want to see, why are you running, and are you passionate about the reason why you're running, or are you just running because you want to be an elected official? So it's so the podcast presents a unique challenge in that way, much tougher than in a live candidate forum that you might have in a city hall, where the public can come ask questions of each candidate, right?
Yes.
That's a lot easier than a podcast, I think, because just the nature of the electronics involved.
Okay, so now they've shared their passion, they delivered their message, they've established a platform, and now how would you recommend them using that podcast to get it out in front of the potential voters?
Well, then you're going to get a recording of it, of course, and you want to make sure that hits as many social media portals that you can get access to. Plus, you want to send it on to hundreds and hundreds of your friends, associates, and ask them to share it with all their people. And it's amazing how fast you can hit a lot of people by doing that. It's really, and that's where, a social media expert comes in and is really valuable. So one, a PR expert, number two, a social media expert, are extremely valuable in today's day and era.
And then just the repetition of having that message delivered over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, Kurt, this has been great advice. Is there any golden nugget you would like to leave the audience with the power of a podcast?
Yes. The most important thing in a campaign is you've got to convince people that you are passionate about this office you're running for, and you've got to get that message to them, make them believe it. And they're only going to believe it if it's true. So the podcast presents a little bit of a challenge like that, but it can work to your advantage if the other candidates aren't able to deliver that passion. And so it's a great tool. And I think as time goes on, we'll all get much more effective and better at using it. So I'm really excited about this opportunity.
Well, Kurt, Mr. Gig Harbor, thank you very much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.